everybody, and welcome back to the New England Sports Weekly podcast for this week's episode. And if you're listening on the live stream, welcome back in. Sorry about all the technical difficulties we had there, but we're ready to roll and everything should be good to go. As it's going to be a busy show tonight, as it's the MLB Trade Deadline special. Of course, we'll touch on a few other topics around New England sports, as it is the start of NFL training camp. The Boston Bruins also have stayed busy here in the offseason, as free agency is underway as we speak. So things are getting cooking here as we're past the MLB All-Star break, so we're past the dead zone. And of course, this year it's an Olympic year. Well, wasn't supposed to be, but COVID, that shit happened. And the Olympics are this summer, so it's an action-packed week we have here for you. And as you mentioned earlier on, it's just been really been a crappy week weather-wise, and haven't had any of my men's league games in about 5 to 6 weeks. So it has been really stir crazy here around the house, just finding stuff to do. So watching sports has been one of the things that has kept me sane over this period. So without further ado, we'll get right out of the box here. As we mentioned, the Bruins have actually been pretty busy, as they had signed Taylor Hall to a 4-year, $26 million deal. So as we mentioned last week, they were looking at a contract for around an average annual value of close to $6 million. So it was right at $6 million, right on the dot. So he gets that 4-year deal. He'll anchor that second line, possibly with Krejci, but things are kind of still up in the air with Krejci. So can't really bank on that just yet, but I would imagine sooner rather than later we'll hear from Krejci. I don't think he's going to pull a Gronk and all of a sudden leave him out dry and hanging there and not let them sign Jared Cook a la 2019. But I think eventually you'll end up seeing David Krejci's name crossed off that list. And as well as the Boston Bruins have also traded Dan Vladar to the Calgary Flames. So that was one of the options that could have been your backup goaltender, because as of right now, we all know that Tuukka Rask is out until probably about, at the very earliest, the end of January. But if you're looking at anything normal, you're looking probably middle of February, sometime second, third week of the month. So you're not really looking at a situation where it's going to be Tuukka coming back and you can use him as your primary goaltender to ride him through most of the season. And of course, we all knew that this was going to be Swayman's coming out party as far as seeing if he could be the starting goaltender anyways. And there was already that debate going between the postseason and the end of last year, and with Tuukka being up there in age, 33, 34 years old. So it's not exactly a surprise that they're shopping in that goaltender market, but it was a little bit of just a mild surprise that they ended up trading Dan Vladar to Calgary in that standpoint. But the Bruins actually have gone out and they have signed some other free agent goaltenders as well, as they sign the backup, let's see here, their former Detroit goaltender, Linus Ullmark, is now in the mix for that backup spot. Like I said, I would imagine that they're still probably going to end up bringing back Tuukka later on. They probably have some wink deal there that you'll be looking at. And in that list of Bruins move, they've signed Nick Falgiano, a forward. And then they've also brought in Eric Hallelujah, as well as Thomas Nosek. So 2 forwards there. They did bring back Mike Riley, who at times played pretty well. That last series against the Islanders in the postseason, wasn't his best, but I still liked enough what he brought and brings some good depth. He could be that second line defenseman if you really need him to be, if you don't find some other defenseman here in the trade market after the free agency period dries up, as well as Derek Forbort, Troy Grosnick, and Samuel Olsen, and Tyler Lewington. So they didn't really go into the deep end of the pool here. Now, of course, free agency is still going on, so it's not like they can't do any of that right at the moment. But the two big ones we're bringing back, or the three big ones, we're bringing back Taylor Hall, trading Dan Vladar, and bringing back Mike Riley. So the Bruins keeping themselves active here. And that really was the big news so far for Boston. Now, we'll keep an eye out here if things start to heat up for the Bruins moving later on into the offseason. Hopefully they can bring in maybe another top six forward if Krejci leaves, bring in some more scoring depth. We'll see how that goes. And as we mentioned, Patriots training camp has now opened up in the rest of the NFL as well. Today was the first official day of training camp. And of course, the very first one out there was, drumroll please, Nelson Aguilar. Yeah, I know you're probably expecting somebody else, but actually, Mac Jones was right behind him. He was the first quarterback out, and I believe the second player overall. Not that that really says that really means anything, but it's always interesting to see some of those newcomers to see if they're the first ones out. And of course, a couple of them already were. So it was exciting to see training camp open up. We'll talk a little bit about camp here next week. We're going to take a deep dive into training camp and preview the Patriots training camp and a lot of stories from around the NFL, as well as our NFL preview as well, as we get right into the NFL season. Man, that's coming up fast. Where did the summer go? I know we still got August, but man, it's been a whirlwind. It just seems like everything has flown by this year. It's crazy. And I remember as a kid, it seemed like summer would never end and you never wanted it to. And then now as an adult, it's just like, oh, summer's here. Summer's like, wow, I can't wait for summer to get here. And then you turn your head and it's September. It's crazy. But getting back into the box here, as some other news from around the NFL, this was not really Patriots related, but if you had a pipe dream in the offseason, let's just say, this had a little bit of Patriots kind of tinge to it. But Aaron Rodgers is now staying in Green Bay. And why I say I had a little bit of Patriots tinge to it is that there were a lot of, albeit very far-flung, pipe dream, whatever adjective you want to throw at that. It really wasn't realistic at all. There's probably about a 0.5% chance that Rodgers was actually going to end up in a Pats uniform, but he can all dream, right? But anyways, Aaron Rodgers is going to be staying in Green Bay. They didn't rework the contract as far as he's not signing another extension per se, but they basically agreed for him to come back, make some concessions for this year. They did trade to get Randall Cobb, so he'll be staying in Green Bay at least for this year. So it feels more like Aaron Rodgers' swan song there in Green Bay. So any hopes of a Patriots trade to bring Aaron Rodgers to New England, at least for 2021, you'll have to shelf that and maybe revisit that next year unless Mac Jones really balls out, or if you just want to believe in Mac Jones as the long-term starter. So that's something that, as I mentioned, next week is going to be the NFL training camp and NFL preview show. So we'll get into more of that next week. We'll dive right deep into that because I know we're the New England Sports Weekly pod, but the NFL is just such a big sport, and I'm sure all of you love it just as much as I do. Of course, we'll talk heavy on the Patriots because that's our team here, but of course, we're looking to bring in some special guests as well to help break that down. So we'll tweet that out as well. And speaking of Twitter, you can always follow the show on Twitter at NE Sports Weekly. give it a follow there. Send us your questions as usual. We will answer them over the air. Always look forward to those as well. So, the other big news, other than the Bruins and the NFL opening up its training camp, has been the Major League Baseball trade deadline. And some big things have actually come out of that already, even though the deadline's not until Friday, as the Tampa Bay Rays have already traded for Nelson Cruz, the 41-year-old slugger, but he's still going strong, a la the Tom Brady route, into his 40s already, and right around getting close to 500 home runs in his career. So he's still a valuable piece, and arguably one of the best trade pieces the Rays have ever made. So that'll be something that we discuss a little bit here, as well as moves that other teams in the division have made. And then the Oakland A's today have pulled off a trade for Starling Marte, the former number one overall prospect for the Pirates, not number one overall, I should say, in Major League Baseball, but for in the Pirate system. He had a really good 3 to 5 year career there in Pittsburgh before he was dealt off to Miami, and was having an all-star year there. So, of course, Miami, not in contention, not in true contention, put him up on the block. And now the Oakland A's have traded for Starling Marte. And that was a piece that, from sort of the outside, people had been not mocking, we're not talking about a fantasy draft here, but had speculated that the Red Sox might be interested in, just to give them a leadoff hitter. But Kike Hernandez, now I'm not completely sold on Kike, don't get me wrong, but with Kike struggles before the All-Star break, when he wasn't what he has been over this past 3 weeks, let's say, it's been a struggle. So now it's been interesting to see how the outfield's shaking out here, as Kike has really solidified that leadoff spot, and Jarren Duran has come in as well. Hasn't been setting the world on fire, but as I say that, he just hit an inside the park home run. So go figure there, boys. So he ends up doing it. Wow, let's just take a live look at this, analyze this. He crushes this one into deep center field. Wow, that was crazy. And then that's a 2-run inside the park home run. That just tells you the type of speed that Jarren Duran has. That's something that even on a semi-speedy outfielder, or not even outfielder, anybody that's got somewhat speed, that probably would just be a triple for anybody else, because he hit that, and that hit the garage door out there in center field. So it stopped. So it's not like it bounced around. The center fielder had plenty of time to get it. He just was trucking around the third base, and he was safe. Sorry, I know normally we don't do that, but that was a thing of beauty. Is that kind of melted right into what we were talking about with the Oakland A's getting Starling Marte. So that's his second big league home run, and it's an inside the park version. So really, they at this point, like I've said, even though I'm getting a little jacked up just seeing that, you still have to see a little bit more out of Duran. But I do believe in Duran. I think that long term, he is going to be your center fielder / left fielder, wherever you want to end up batting him and Alex Verdugo around. So I think that spot you can live with trying to develop that rookie lower down in the lineup, and then you don't have to worry about spending pieces on a big piece like Starling Marte. You can focus that on other places. But anyways, that was one of the big ones right there. And then, of course, another move that just came down as the show was starting, or as we were probably having technical difficulties, is the New York Yankees have ended up trading for Joey Gallo. So that one will be interesting to see, because Joey Gallo has a ton of power, but It's the proverbial swing and miss especially with Gallo. At this point, I was checking it out earlier tonight before I got on the air, and he already has 124 strikeouts already. So he's going to probably end up leading the league in strikeouts by the time everything is said and done. He does have 70 walks, so he's walking quite a lot. It's just the average is way down there. So it's pretty much swing at everything. And then you end, well, I shouldn't say swing at everything because he is leading the league in walks. But at that type of pace, it's pretty much just you swing at almost everything. You get on base at a decent clip, but you're really it's all or nothing with Joey Gallo. So I'm not like totally impressed, especially because that Yankees lineup needed more left. They needed, even though they got a left-hander, they just needed somebody that had more contact because that lineup already has too many guys that swing and miss. But that was just my thought there after seeing that come down. So there have been some pretty big moves that have already happened. Will the Red Sox join the party? We'll talk about that in just a moment as we will get to the trade deadline special. But before we dive right into the deep end of the pool there, we'll touch on the New England Patriots as it is now that time of year again, folks. It's already training camp time. It really is. I wish I was lying, not because I don't want the NFL season to get here. It's just it seems like the summer has gone by so fast, but it already is. It's the end of July. Training camp is getting into full swing here as the Patriots just opened up camp today. Now, the big news coming out of today's first day was that Mac Jones had a pretty good day. No, of course, it's not going to be like he made 100% of his throws. He's a rookie, but from all in all, he was able to make good reads. He threw a pretty good corner pass to the left side pylon in the back of the end zone over to Nelson Aguilar, and he made pretty good connections with the new tight ends as well. I guess apparently he missed a swing pass out to one of the running backs. Now, I don't know who it is. I mean, if it's one of those stone-handed guys, like I wouldn't call Sony Michel stone-handed, but if you're talking like a Ramondre Stevens or one of those power backs, I can see how that would go. But, I mean, that's a little concerning if you're talking about an offense that's what your bread and butter is. When you get somebody like a Mac Jones who's more precision, go back to the days of Brady where you use that running back as a wheel route or a little check down route. But it's the first day of training camp. I'm not going to really lament over that. That's something that can be fixed here. We're day one of training camp of day one of Mac Jones's first ever training camp. So whatever. He went to Alabama. He played with good running backs. I've seen him make those passes, so I'm not going to cry here. That's not really shocking to me. You make mistakes. But the things that I was happy about was that he went out there, looked pretty good, was pretty confident, was out there, was comfortable making changes because, of course, like I said, went to Alabama. He's played under that system. Now, you all know how I feel about Mac Jones. Not that I did not want him, but he was probably that third, fourth quarterback that I would have taken if I was the Patriots. You all know that I wanted Justin Fields. He was my preferred preference here that I wanted them to draft. But I still believe that doesn't mean I don't believe in Mac Jones. So that's encouraging on my end to see that Mac Jones is out there and already looking semi-comfortable. Now, of course, you're a rookie, so I'm not going to say he's out there and going to be as comfortable as a veteran would be. But as far as a rookie, as far as comfortability for a rookie, from all accounts, he seemed pretty comfortable with the first day of practice. You're going to make your mistakes, which he did. But from all accounts, he was able to recover pretty quickly, which is good news. And the other good news is that Cam Newton struggled. Don't get me wrong. Cam was a nice guy last year. He was a leader. You can say all the good things, all the intangibles, blah, 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 whatever. But the thing that makes you feel good if you're a Patriots fan, if you're on the Mac Jones side of the street, is that Cam Newton ended up not having a good end of the practice. He threw some picks. He well overthrew his tight ends in the end zone, is what I heard in reports and saw some tweets today. And that's not good because those tight ends are the best damn receivers you have on the team. So if you're overthrowing those guys, oh, God, that's not good. Not good. Not good, Bob. Not at all. Because you spent all that money on them, and the Cam supporters that are out there are the ones that were pretty much from day number one, we're like, well, you got all these new pieces now. Cam should be better. Cam should be better. And I know it's day one, and I know I should have said I shouldn't overreact with Mac Jones, but come on, really, that's easy. That we're not talking about full go practice yet, where we're in full pads and tackling. We're talking about just trying to make passes here to your tight ends. Not that they're not covering, but we're not talking about we're full pads and tackling yet. And you are overthrowing receivers and tight ends, and you're just back to what you were last year. Oh boy, it's not good for the Patriots overall, but it's good if you're on the side of the street like I am with Mac Jones, where you want to see where I've already predicted I think Mac Jones is going to be the starter. Now I know that's a low bar for him to walk over with what Cam set last year, or the lack of bar that he set. But really, I mean, Mac Jones, coupled with Mac Jones's good day of practice, not phenomenal, but good day from all accounts. He went 9 for 17 or 9 for 19, depending on the reports that you read. But basically, everything is coming up everything is coming up Mac as far as this day is gone. So everything is working out for him, and he really didn't need too much more help from Newton as far as on Newton struggling. I wasn't the one that was really buying, oh, this is going to be a tight race. This is going to be a tight competition. This is going to be decided right down at the wire. I never really bought into that, because you pretty much, after last year, I think you brought in Cam as a placeholder, maybe a little bit of a recruiter to bring some of those guys in. And speaking of him, Cam being a recruiter, he brought in a guy. Oh, let's just say, well, I can't really say he brought him in, but of course you can only imagine that Jonnu Smith probably came here, had the name recognition of Cam Newton. It's like, all right, I'll come here. But of course, we all know why he got paid a lot of money. Let's not mince words here. But still, I'm sure having Cam there helped maybe 1%, 2%, 3%. Who knows? But even he today was quoted saying that Mac Jones has some swag that he didn't know that he had. Because, I mean, obviously you're at Alabama. He wasn't, as far as in the media, he wasn't a really talkative guy, all that type of stuff. So it's not like he was out there being really brash and talkative. But apparently in the locker room behind closed doors, he's got a lot of swag, and he's got a lot of that it factor that honestly that I didn't think he had, but he does. So that's even another check in his book. And that's another nail in the coffin for Cam Newton as well, as far as him being the starter. So we'll see how that goes for Cam, if he's going to end up being that starter day one. Like I said, I'll keep saying it. I don't think he is. I think this is Mac Jones's job to lose. I called it from day one after he got drafted. So this is his job. But of course, Belichick, he does like to give his veterans a fair shake. But I just think things that Belichick has said even today were in his press conference, where this is a new slate for everybody, even for the coaches. And I know you got to work through the Belichick speak, and you can't buy into some of the BS. I get that. But if just from being a Patriots fan for over 20 years, since I was born, probably since I was 6 years old. So for about 25, 26 years of my life, being a Patriots fan. And of course, since Belichick has been here for 20 plus years, you know how things go. You know how it goes. You just, And when things like he says today, where just the way that he said it's going to be a new slate for everybody, that everybody's working for their job, he didn't just guarantee it like other coaches will go out there and guarantee. Now, obviously, this isn't the days of Tom Brady, so you can't just be like, "Well, he's got Tom Brady, so he's lying." Blah blah blah. No, you have a rookie out there, and we all know what happened with Cam. So I really think this is everything is coming up roses and smelling like roses here for Mac Jones. He's in a perfect spot right now with Cam just having at least from day one having a bad start to camp, and all the new teammates and so far the old teammates have just given him a lot of praise. So everything is just working out great for Mac Jones. Now, once you get into the preseason games, we'll see who gets the majority of the snaps with the first teamers. And once we get into that second game, which most likely is going to be what the third game of the season used to be as far as preseason, now that there's only 3 games. So we'll see how that goes. So I really, really like how day number 1 went if you're a Patriots fan. And the other piece of news as we got into camp is that Stephon Gilmore is reporting to camp, but he'll be on the PUP list, which I wasn't surprised. That really did not shock me, because that was one of the things that I kind of in the back of my mind. If you don't get a contract ironed out before things get to training camp, before you get to the season, that's where I think he'll come into camp. He's not stupid. He knows he's going to get fined $50,000 each day that he's not at practice. And then once you get into not the preseason games, but once you get into regular season, then that's where the heavy checks start to come into play. You don't get your game checks. So that's just something that I see. That's a smart move by Stephon Gilmore. You still get to go in. You get to talk with Belichick. You're there with your teammates. You're not causing a ruckus. You're not causing a distraction. You're there. You're able to contribute to this team. I like it. It's a good move on both parts. And Stephon doesn't really lose his leverage. He'll be able to. I think probably in the next. I think by next week's podcast, I'll put it out there. I'll put my arm, or I'll put my head out on the line for you folks. I think he'll end up getting a new contract. If I was to say, the way things have gone, I know I was always sticking with the 2 years with the backloaded third year of a deal where you could end up just cutting him loose on that third year, where it's kind of like that, you wipe your hands clean. But I think just with all the cap space that they cleared, I think in this time, I think I've kind of come down a step on the deal. I think it'll just be a reworked 1-year deal. You'll still give him that $7 million, and then give him a couple more million and some incentives that he can earn, and then he'll be back. So I think by next week, I think this gets ironed out, gets hammered out, because I know Belichick knows how important he is to this defense. After spending all of that money on Matthew Judon, bringing back Kyle Van Noy, beefing up that defensive line, and then spending some high draft picks on Barmore and Perkins. So I like what he brings to the table in this situation, or I like how he's handling it, I should say. So, and you know that Belichick doesn't want to just put his hands in this defense in the hands of just J.C. Jackson and some aging or unproven pieces in the back end of there. And I'm not talking about the safeties. The safeties are pretty good with Devin McCourty, and I like what you have in Kyle Duggar, but I'm talking about, you don't know really what you have in Jalen Mills yet. And then behind J.C. Jackson, you just have a slot corner, albeit Jonathan Jones is a good one, but you don't want to put a slot corner on the outside. We've seen how that happens. You'll get burned. So you don't want to just leave this to J.C. Jackson and everybody else. You still would have a decent secondary, but with Stephon and J.C. and then Duggar and McCourty, that's a pretty good secondary. And you have a chance to be a really good defense altogether with everything put into place there. So I see this getting resolved by next week. I think we'll get something by next podcast. If we're wrong, I don't know, maybe you guys can send out some type of punishment that I have to do. I'm not sure. We'll figure that out. Send me your tweets, send me your questions, send something in the live chat. Maybe we'll make something up here. But that's really the big news and notes so far from the early portion of training camp. Now, of course, we will have our full NFL training camp breakdown, preview show, season preview as we get into next week's show. So that's where we'll leave it today for Patriots training camp, as we're going to get into the Major League Baseball trading deadline. That is the special for today, as Friday is the MLB trade deadline. Now, remember, folks, they got rid of the non-waiver trade deadline and waiver trade deadline as well a couple of years ago. So that trade that the Houston Astros made back in 2017 when they got Justin Verlander, those type of trades won't happen anymore, because that happened back in August, where the Detroit Tigers knew that they were out of it by that point. So they ended up trading them away to the Houston Astros. So those type of trades where guys have to pass through waivers. So now everything is basically non-waiver trade deadline already. So Friday's the deadline for it. And of course, we've already talked about some of the moves earlier on today, with the Rays getting Nelson Cruz, the aging but still really ageless slugger, even though he's 41, still putting together an all-star season, our all-star caliber. Then Starling Marte from the Miami Marlins, who was an all-star, ended up getting traded. And then another all-star from the Texas Rangers in Joey Gallo, the big power bat, got traded to the New York Yankees. But I think at this point, the last nail in the Yankees' coffin was put in this weekend with the Red Sox. I know technically not mathematically eliminated, but really pushing them down to 9.5 games behind. It's really going to be a slog for them to get back, and the Red Sox have already clinched the season series, so it's not like you have a bunch of games you can really make up on the Red Sox. So they're really pushing for that wild card spot at this point. I don't see that happening. There are just too many holes, but we'll see how that one goes. Big power bat in Joey Gallo heading over to the New York Yankees. So what does that mean for your Boston Red Sox? Well, the Red Sox, as we know, they are in first place in the American League East at 62, and after losing today, and 62-40. So they're 22 games above 500, although they are up on the Toronto Blue Jays in game number 2 of this doubleheader, 4-1 as we speak. And remember, it's seven innings, so they're in the 5th. So they're a couple innings away from taking this one from Toronto. So looks like they might end up padding this lead even more in the division, depending on how things go with Tampa tonight as they play New York. So basically, the Red Sox they're in first place in the division. They have the best record in the American League, or tied there right with Houston. So they are in the hunt for the best record in all of the American League and all of Major League Baseball. So they're good. We know they've been good. If you haven't gotten on this train, on the Red Sox train lately, you're missing out. You're going to get run over by the hype train by the bandwagon as well. So you better jump on before it runs you over. So I really don't know what to tell you. This team has been fun and exciting. They've been legitimate from day one. And like I said, I know it didn't take me as long as others, just because I'm a diehard Red Sox fan, but still at the same time, you know, that thing you knew probably by, at least in my estimation, I knew probably by the middle of May that maybe not World Series, not serious playoff contenders, but probably by the middle of May, that's where I kind of was like, all right, something's clicking here. They're at least a playoff contender. They went from, and then probably right at the All-Star break, that's when everything went, okay, this is a serious World Series contender. So all along I've been a believer, but it's just been degrees of believability in this team that have hit for me. So now that I think that this team is a World Series contender, this is a team that you have to invest in. You have to invest in this team. And what are their needs? So if you look at what the Red Sox need here, we're looking at first base, in my opinion, is the biggest need. Now, coming into the season, I was a big believer of Bobby Dahlbeck. Now, I knew Bobby wasn't going to be the next coming Freddie Freeman, Albert Pujols in his prime, Mark McGwire, all that type of stuff. And the crazy thing was there was some scout out there, somebody that compared him to Mark McGwire in his rookie year, and I was like, oh, that's. You say what you want about the steroids, but Mark McGwire in his rookie year had 49 jacks, and it was, I believe, either the MVP or in consideration for it. But the point being is that, yeah, the expectations were a little too high, and yeah, did I heap a little bit on that hit to him as well? I thought you'd be looking at a guy that could hit about in the 260s, drive in 20 to somewhere in that 20 to 25 plus bomb range, maybe even get a little higher on that, maybe break the 30 mark just because he has at least I thought he had a lot of power, and then drive in 75 to about 85 runs for this team and be somebody at the bottom of that order that you could rely on, that wouldn't be an automatic out. Now it's kind of flipped around. He has been, as of lately, pretty much an automatic out. He only is hitting 215 coming into today's action, only 10 home runs, 36 RBIs. So you're looking at a guy that's not going to break anywhere close to that 260 batting mark. He'll be lucky if he finishes this season above the 200 mark, just the way things are going. Probably around 15 home runs and 40 something RBI is the way it's looking right now, just for Bobby. I shouldn't say 40, about 50 something RBIs. Well, it's not gonna be what we all thought for him. So, and of course, the more alarming thing is that he just isn't taking he's not taking a lot of walks. He's not out there being patient, and I don't mean just the walks portion of it. He's swinging at some bad pitches, and he just looks lost up at the plate, and it's been like that for a majority of the season. There was a point in time where, probably about the middle of May, beginning of June, where it looked like, oh, he might be getting out of that slump, but it just hasn't materialized at all. And now, do you need a superstar first baseman that's going to be able to hit third, fourth, fifth in your lineup? No, you don't need that. You need a quality first baseman that can put together major league at-bats. Now, of course, there are going to be some pipe dreams here. There are going to be some big hitters here, and then that you look at that you'll be like, all right, maybe they can go get that as well. Now, obviously, you're looking at maybe more realistic options as well. But to me, first base is just one of those things where that's your biggest priority. Now, going into probably the last 3-4 weeks, where you kind of started to think about the trade deadline, you're like, okay, maybe you need a left-handed or a switch hitter at first base. So there are a couple options there, the Rizzos, the Santanas. Those ones were the ones that you're thinking about, okay, maybe you can bring in somebody like that, give you the left-handed or give you that switch hitter lower and down in the order. Not that Rizzo is not that those two are any low-end bats. Those are middle of the order at worst, like 6-hole hitters. But on this team, with how loaded the middle of that is with JD, Rafael Devers, Xander Bogaerts, and when he's in up until lately, you could throw Hunter Renfroe in there. So you have a really good middle of the order. And they obviously Kike at the top. If you want to mix and match with Jarren Duran, put him in there. Lately, they put Rafi in the 2-hole. So basically, you have a really good 1 through 6, let's say 1 through 6 that you have, or 1 through 5. So you have you have probably one of the best top ends of the order in baseball. You had your 3 through, lately it's been 2 through 4, but depending on what order you put them in, 2 through 4, 3 through 6, 3 through 5, you had pretty much the starting all-star middle of the order minus JD, because Shohei was so good, with Devers, Bogaerts, and then JD right there. So you have huge bats. But the point being is that you don't need that all-star there, but you need a solid first baseman that can lengthen things out, play some good defense. So those two options, and like I said, I thought they were going to need somebody that's left-handed, but just the way that Bobby's been hitting and some of the bottom of that order is gone, even if you get a right-handed guy like a Jonathan Scope, let's just say, or an Aguilar from Miami, those two, I would take those. Obviously, those two are having pretty good seasons. But the point being is that they're right-handed, and just the way that Bobby's lack of production has been, and then switching over guys like Danny Santana, who hasn't worked out over there, not defensively, but just offensively, he just has not done anything. And then they tried to get Christian Arroyo to play a little bit of first, and of course, he was hitting pretty well. But then the first game that he tries in New York a couple weeks ago, he ends up on the disabled list. So that wasn't great. So it's really been a hodgepodge over there at first, even though Bobby's played the majority of it. He just has not caught fire at any point this season. So first base is that one that I really think that they need the most. Now, starting pitching, that one's interesting for me. That's the one that, if I was going to say at the beginning of the year, if they were going to be anywhere close to being contending, that's where at the beginning of the year, I thought that's what they needed the most, was going to be starting pitching, because depending on when Chris Sale, before you knew, obviously right now, that it looks like it's going to be 2 starts at Worcester in AAA before he comes up. You didn't know if he was going to be sometime in July or closer to the end of the year. You weren't sure. Now it looks like Chris Sale will be back around August 10th or so, sometime around that, because he pitches this weekend in Worcester, and then it looks like he'll have one more start, which would be, if I'm correct, August 4th or August 5th, and that would put him on track to be the August 10th starter here for the Boston Red Sox. So even with Chris, so that would have been, even depending on what Chris Sale's health was, that was something that I thought would be a good add to get a starting pitcher even before all this started. But then as things have gone along, I still think they could use one. But with Chris Sale coming back, with the way that Nathan Eovaldi has pitched this year, he's an all-star. He's been healthy. Then you have Erod, if he can figure things out, which he's been better as of late. Now, he hasn't been totally great. He had that scare with a migraine where he had to come out of the game. But if he can show that he's healthy and then he gets back on track, then that 1, 2, 3 with Sale, Eovaldi, and Erod is pretty good. And then depending on how things shake out in the postseason, how you want to line that up, you have Pivetta, Richards, and Perez. So obviously there are 2 obvious candidates there that are going to be the odd man out: Garrett Richards and Perez. So those were the two ones even going into the year that I was like, yeah, those are the ones that I'd really like to upgrade. And then you have Tanner Houck, who's pitching tonight and has pitched really well. He came up throwing the ball very good, very well. So and he's one of those pieces that I hope the Red Sox don't end up trading away in a way to get a big fish out there, like let's say a Max Scherzer or a Rizzo or somebody like that. And we'll get into that here in just a moment of what it might cost for those guys. But when it comes to starting pitching at the beginning of the year, I thought they might need another co-ace or another high-end starter there. But just the way things have gone, pitching hasn't been their Achilles heel. There have been times when guys like, yes, Garrett Richards and Perez have gotten their lunch handed to them on multiple occasions, but they're still where they are today with pitching that's kept them in it. And of course, Eovaldi's done more than do that. He's been an all-star. He's been really good. And then you get Chris Sale back. So I think if you could get, in my opinion, why pitching gets the second part of that is, one, you get Chris Sale coming back. And secondly, the starting rotation has been good enough where it keeps you in those games. Now, obviously, I still would like to see them get one. Maybe you can get the first baseman and a starting pitcher in the deal, depending on where you go to get them. I thought that might be Kansas City with Danny Duffy and Santana, but Duffy's been on and off injured, so it wouldn't be ideal. But still, you if you could get that starting pitcher on a first baseman, that might be the best trade. And maybe, who knows, maybe you can pull off two separate trades, get a higher end pitcher, maybe a Kyle Gibson. With all the speculation there with Scherzer, maybe that drives down the price on Gibson. You never know. But that's something where I think if you could get a number 3 and number 4 there, that kind of lengthens thing out. And after you get Chris Sale, then that would be really good for the Red Sox on their stretch run here. Gives them another quality arm. Now, the one other area of need that I wouldn't call it a strong need. It's more just how the season goes. It has been a relief pitcher. Now, if you want to go to the high end of things and get a closer or get some other bullpen arms, just get some middle relief guys or some other high leverage end of game guys, that's something else to talk about. But to me, relief pitching, closing, middle, back end, that to me isn't their biggest need, because like I've told you before, they have Matt Barnes. Say what you will about him. He started off the year hot, and I mean, he's still really good. I mean, every closer, unless your name is Mariano Rivera, are going to have hiccups during the regular season. You're not going to, unless you're Mariano Rivera, or when it was Eric Gagne, he went through that stretch and had 53 consecutive saves. Yeah, of course you're going to have, unless you're in one of those hot stretches, you're going to blow a save here or there. But I've liked what I've seen out of Matt Barnes. So I would still, if they didn't go out and get somebody like a Craig Kimbrell or Rodriguez from the Pirates, then I wouldn't feel uncomfortable with what their situation with Barnes is, because he was an all-star closer. Looks like he's turned a corner in his career and found out how to attack players ahead of time instead of nibbling around the zone. So I like what Matt Barnes has done. Then you have Adam Ottavino, you have Sal Almora, you have Garrett Whitlock, and you have Darwinson Hernandez. So you're looking at 6 guys. Plus, depending on what you think of Brazier, Ryan Brazier was pretty good in 2018 in late inning situations. And then if you throw out a starter out there like a Garrett Richards, now obviously it's a different situation than starting. So if you can amp things up a little bit instead of having to pull things back as a starter. Now, I'm not saying Richards is going to be a late inning guy, but my point is, you have Barnes, you have Ottavino, you have Josh Taylor, you have Sal Almora, you have Hernandez. So you have a really good pen. You know how many teams would kill to have half of what you have in the back end? A lot of contending teams. The Houston Astros would probably trade for that bullpen that you have. But you still, just because the way the war of attrition in baseball, you probably could use a back end guy. If you wanted to go get a Craig Kimbrell, I wouldn't be opposed to it, depending on what you have to give up. And then you have another elite end of the game. And even Matt Barnes today kind of came out and said that he would be okay with that, now that he has, basically, because he's got his contract now, he doesn't have to worry about getting his money. And of course, if it's an elite guy like Craig Kimbrell, who he already has a relationship with, then why not? Why not do that? That would be amazing. But to me, that's the lowest on the totem pole of actual needs that the Red Sox should go after, because to me, it's first base and starting pitching are far and above relief pitching. And I know some people go, I've heard the argument, well, you could just go for just pitching in general. To me, that's a difference. To me, I'd rather get that starting pitching so that you're not putting all that stress on the bullpen, because as good as the Red Sox have been, they've had to go to that bullpen more than I'd like to see them go at times, especially when you're going through that Garrett Richards, Martin Perez, and sometimes, depending on how Nick Pivetta goes, because Nick Pivetta has been a good revelation, but there have been a few clunkers. So that back end of the rotation at times has cost that bullpen some wear and tear. So if you can get a starter that lengthens things out here, then I would like that a lot more than having that bullpen arm out there. But obviously, if you get a Kimbrel, then you're talking about another elite arm or Rodriguez. But if you got like some middle of the road guy, then I wouldn't be too excited about that. That's why I lean more on the starting pitching end of the argument for the Red Sox. Now, as we mentioned, those are the biggest needs for this team. Now, if you examine what is out on the market for the Red Sox, as far as if you look at first base, I know we already mentioned his name, but Anthony Rizzo is the biggest one of them all at first base. Now, if you're familiar with Anthony Rizzo, I'm sure a lot of you are, because he's basically been the face of the Cubs since he came over in 2013, 2014, whenever he came over to Chicago. Let's see, and obviously, as we looked this up, you remember that he was in the Red Sox farm system. He was a 7th round pick out of his high school in Florida for the Red Sox. And he went to Chicago in 2012, by the way. So he's basically been the face of that franchise since probably 2012, maybe 2013 would be more accurate, when he hit 23 bombs, drove in 80 for the Chicago Cubs. But ever since he went to Chicago. He has been the face of Chicago, of that Cubs organization. He was hitting in the middle of that order, was a big key cog to that Chicago Cubs team that finally broke through and won the World Series in 2016. In that year, he was an all-star. He was 4th in MVP voting. He ended up hitting 32 home runs, drove in 109, which is tied for a career high. Hit 292. So obviously, we're talking about a guy that can come in and hit in the middle of the order, and is a great left-handed bat, plays good defense. And obviously, he was already familiar with Boston because he was drafted by this team and was going to be the first baseman of the future. He is basically what he is to Chicago. He was supposed to be here to Boston, but as you know, he got traded away in that Adrian Gonzalez trade, and the rest is history. And we won't go down that road because that's a little bit of a sore subject here. Even though I was a big Adrian Gonzalez fan, that one hurt because of what ended up happening with Gonzalez, where he basically kind of shot his way out of town and and you only had a year and a half of him. So that wasn't great. And now that you know that you could have had Rizzo, it hurts. But you have a chance to bring him back here to town. Now, what you have to look at with Anthony Rizzo, all that being said with the positives, as far as him being a power hitting first baseman, hits for a pretty good average, drives and runs, middle of the order bat, has a really good glove at first base. Great for the clubhouse, by the way, too. He's really good for the clubhouse. The negatives for this year, anyways, is that he is only hitting 248 with 14 home runs and 40 RBIs. So he started to pick it back up since the All-Star break, but coming out of the All-Star break, he wasn't the same Anthony Rizzo that he has been. The last time that he was over the 20 the last time that he was over that 25 plus home run mark was in 2019. And I know I say that with the pandemic being last year, but still 2019, he hit 27 bombs, 94 RBIs, and hit 293. So by no means am I saying that his career is anywhere to being close to being done. I mean, he's still only 31 years old, so he could find this at any time. But this is a down year from him. So is this injury related? I don't think it has anything to do with any major injuries. I just think there's a lot going on there in Chicago where he's been stressed out. They've talked about it. He and the rest of those superstars there with Chris Bryant, Javier Baez, that core three there, they've had to deal with a lot of mental pressure just because this Chicago Cubs core, which was supposed to be young and lead this team to not just one World Series, maybe get back to a couple more, win another one, kind of do what the Red Sox did after they broke the curse in 2004, where they started on a roll, but that really hasn't happened. And like I said, he's the face of the town. So it's going to be it's going to be difficult for them to trade him just because of what he means to that team. And the return that you would get for him, that's going to be the good thing there. Speaking of returns for the Red Sox, with how well, with the underperformance that he's had this year, seeing as he didn't make the All-Star team, he's only got 14 home runs and 40 RBIs, and is only hitting 248. We know he could snap back into it, and that's what you'd hope if you trade for him. The return for the Cubs, you're not going to get what you would if you're talking about Chris Bryant, who for a while was in the MVP conversation. That kind of cooled off, but you're not talking about getting a Chris Bryant. You're not talking about a Max Scherzer return, about one of these guys where they're still in the prime, which he is, but when they're having a good season. And he's also, this is the last year of his deal. So between him being on the final year of his deal, not having his standard of a good season, now obviously he's having better than Bobby Dahlback is, but the point being is that if with the way he's playing and with his contract, that works out in the Red Sox favor, because you're not having to send away a Jarren Duran, send them over Tristan Casas, your top prospect overall and your power hitting first baseman. You don't have to send them Marcelo Mayer or any of these high level prospects. And hopefully that wouldn't mean that you would have to send over Tanner Houck, one of your best pitching prospects, who's pitched pretty well tonight. You could maybe send over a package of a lower level prospects, kind of what ended up happening with some of those other notable stars that have some lower production over the last couple of years. So you're not talking about Anthony Rizzo hitting 25, 30 plus bombs already and having to pay that high price. And then the other thing to really think of is, as far as contenders go, you're the only contender that truly needs a first baseman. You really are. You look at it everywhere else, you're the only one that really needs a first baseman. So you're pretty much the market. So you can kind of wait this one out until Friday and say to the Cubs, okay, no, I'm not going to give you what you want, basically, for lack of a better term there, just because you'll end up bidding against yourself, no matter if it's Anthony Rizzo or if you look over with the Cleveland Indians at who else, who is another one that I would like in Carlos Santana. In that situation, I think you could pretty much get away with, in those two situations, you can go to them at the last hour without having to outbid yourself, and you pretty much don't have to give up any high level prospects, because we're not talking about like Scherzer, like we'll get into here in a moment, where that's pretty much the situation that you're going to have to outbid 7 other teams, basically. Now, as you mentioned, Carlos Santana, he's really the other one that I really would like to see them go after, because if you don't get Anthony Rizzo, or if the price is too high for Rizzo, with Carlos Santana, he's a switch hitter. He has a history of hitting for power. He has 257 career home runs, only has an average of 248 as far as his career goes. And right now he's hitting 236. So it's not like he's hitting a ton better than Bobby Dahlback. We're talking about a guy where the history of production is there. His major league average is 26 home runs, 86 RBIs, hits 248 in his career. So that's a perfect guy that you could slide down into that 6th spot and get some good production. Right now, he has 17 home runs, 55 RBIs, and 236. So that would be a good place to look at as far as the Red Sox are concerned. And plus, you get that switch hitter that you can have in the lineup. You don't have to worry about taking him out, playing the matchup game there. You throw him in the lineup pretty much every day, unless he needs a day off. So I would really like to see that if you don't get Anthony Rizzo. So for me, if I'm ranking them, it goes Anthony Rizzo and then Carlos Santana. And then the next one that has been thrown out recently is Jonathan Schoop with the Tigers. Now, you all remember Jonathan Schoop from his days with the Baltimore Orioles. he at the time was a second baseman, played middle infield, but as he's gotten older and a little bit bigger and a little bit slower, he switched over to being a first baseman with the Detroit Tigers. Now, this one would be a little outside the box just from the standpoint that you're getting a guy that's a right-handed hitter, even though the Red Sox would most preferably want to get that left-handed bat. And get somebody that could lengthen out that lineup, lower in the order, and mix things up with that lefty. But Jonathan Schoop, at this point, the Red Sox are just looking for major league production and a major league bat at first base. And the Detroit Tigers aren't going anywhere. They're cooked. They're bad. They're horrible. But the Detroit Tigers have some intriguing pieces, albeit we're not talking about any superstars. But in this case with Jonathan Schoop, who would just be another rental player that you would get, he's having a pretty good season. Actually, it's been really good as far as Jonathan Schoop is concerned. He is hitting 17 home runs, already has 60 RBIs, is hitting 284 on the season. So the counting stats that you're looking at right there have been really good. He's walked 24 times, so it's not like he's walks a bunch. But he's right on pace with his major league average of 27 home runs, 81 RBIs. So he's right. He's right on that path to getting his averages. So that's something that I think if you don't want to pay up for Anthony Rizzo, and if Carlos Santana just is a little too rich for your blood, because I know some people have talked about that with Carlos Santana, he has that extra year left. It's 1 year for $10 million. But honestly, I think that might be not a bad way to go, because you get to keep Santana for another year. And then you give Tristan Casas another year to develop if he needs it at all. And $10 million, even with them trying to kind of stay underneath that $10 million, because I believe they're at 210 already when it comes to the threshold on the taxes. So that's a little concerning if you're kind of looking at some of these players. But I think the ownership knows that they're right in contention. So I don't think they're not going to pull a New York Yankees and not trade for people because of that. Don't worry. I don't think that's going to be the case. So I think you're safe. So if you're the Red Sox and you're not into the Santana thing, this is where I think Jonathan Schoop for me would be number 3 on the list, just because he's been productive. You're going to get him cheap. You don't have to hang on to him long term. There's no big contract you have to swallow after this. And like I said, you get that power, lengthens it out down there. You get a real good first baseman, and in a pinch, he can go play second base. You can move him around some other places. So I'm all for that if that's what they want to do, because looking at it here, he's already played first and second this year, so he's already played in those spots already. So you get somebody that's going to be versatile as well. Now, if we're looking at some of the other ones out there, there's been some rumors that the Dodgers might want to get rid of Eric Hosmer. That one, I'm not a big fan of Eric Hosmer, just because he's well overpaid. And I believe he's got 2 more years left. He's not a power hitter. He doesn't hit he hits for a decent average, but his on base this year is just above 700. His OPS, I should say, on base plus slugging, is just a little below 730 something. So you're not talking about any guy that's lighting the world on fire, and if I'm going to do that, there's other options, other cheaper options if I'm going to get subpar performance. So I'll stay away from that. Now, the other one that is a little intriguing is Jesus Aguilar out of Miami. He's having a really good season. Now, he's a little bit younger. He's one of those pieces that it's going to be a little bit more difficult to try to pry away. Not because the Miami Marlins are beholden to him at all, But I just think just because of the age factor there with Aguilar, and he does have he could go play a few other positions there for third base as well. There might be some other contenders out there that might be looking into that. And just because of his production this year, he's hit 17 home runs, driven in 72, which leads the National League, in a batting average of 265. So that would be a legitimate middle of the order bat. So not that I wouldn't be in favor of them getting Aguilar. You're just talking about a guy that has struck out 72 times, but again, you're looking for the production. So Aguilar is another one there that you look at and is intriguing. So I'd be interested in getting Aguilar. Just I don't know what the price is going to be there. That one I'm not as sure on. I haven't heard a lot out of Miami what they're looking for him. It's not like Marte, who that was the expensive one as we look at that. So if I was going to rank this, I would say Rizzo first, Santana second, Scope because of the price, the low price, number 3, Aguilar 4, and then Hosmer 5th, and Hosmer like a distant 5th. So those are what you're looking at. So hopefully by next show, we'll see them get Rizzo or Santana. I really ended the top 4. I would be okay with. I'd be fine with if they got with that at first base. And then the other major one that we talked about already as far as their needs was starting pitching. Now, with starting pitching, it starts with and pretty much kind of ends with Max Scherzer as far as the real big ticket item that's out there. Now, the only problem with Max Scherzer is he's going to be well sought after and expensive because, like I said, there are 8 teams that are pretty much in the chase for Max Scherzer. And obviously, you've already heard the rumors about the Dodgers, of course, now with all the issues that Trevor Bauer's had and with Clayton Kershaw dealing with injuries. That's going to be something to see if they go after Scherzer. And, of course, the rest of the NL West that's in contention with the San Francisco Giants would love to pair him with Kevin Gausman and Johnny Cueto. And then you also have the San Diego Padres who would like to bolster that rotation that they have going on out in San Diego with Yu Darvish and Blake Snell. Just imagine that. Blake Snell, Yu Darvish, and Max Scherzer. That would be ridiculous. Now, I don't think San Diego is going to have enough firepower with just all the ammunition they spent in the offseason to get Darvish and to get Blake Snell. It'll be interesting to see. But, hey, I mean, you already have a lot of your young core up there, so maybe you might be willing to spend a little bit to try to get past that West. So we'll see how that goes in that standpoint. But, of course, those are the big ones that you have to worry about. And then in your own division, you have to worry about the Tampa Bay Rays. They have been rumored to be a serious contender for Max Scherzer. So that's something that would scare me to death because you're talking about a team that's only to start the day before the doubleheader came along, 2 games. You're only 2 games ahead. Tampa Bay already has a good history with pitching. I don't know what the status of Tyler Glasnow is, but if he is able to come back and you pair him with Scherzer, or even if he doesn't, you still have a solid rotation down there. Then you pair Scherzer there. That's a surefire Hall of Famer that's still pitching. Man, can you say in his prime at 35, 36? I don't know, but he's got a late prime, if anything. He's still pitching like a stud. He was the starter at the All-Star game, so he certainly is. He's still the good old Max Scherzer. So it'll be interesting to see. I'd love to see them I'd love to see the Red Sox though try to push hard for Scherzer. That's been the one thing kind of since that's really come to the forefront. Even I guess apparently today the Red Sox ownership has given permission to the front office to pretty much go after him hard if they want to. Now, when it comes to Scherzer, what besides having him go to the Tampa Bay Rays, the only thing that kind of scares me with him is going to be the price tag, because obviously he's been a icon there. He in Washington, he helped the Nationals get to the World Series and win it in 2019. And of course, he's a surefire Hall of Famer. He'll probably be the first ever National, even though I know he didn't start his career there. I know he started in Arizona and then got traded to Detroit, but he spent most of his career, a majority of it, in Washington. So he'll be there, represent their first ever representative in the Hall of Fame in this incarnation as the Nationals. So obviously, with the amount of teams that are in on him, the meaning that he has to that franchise, and even teams within your own division that are going after him, that's kind of what scares me there. Is the price is going to be steep. If they start to ask for Tristan Casas, any of the real top prospects, Darren Duran, Tanner Houck, I don't know, maybe a Tanner Houck. I might be, if you're getting Scherzer and you're going to compete for a World Series, that's where I might say give to Houck, but I just love Houck so much as far as what he brings to the table. So it's going to be interesting to see when it comes to Tanner. I mean, when it comes to Scherzer, what the price is going to be. Like I said, if that price is too high, where they're asking for way too many top prospects, they're asking for way too much as far as some major league pieces to come back, then that's where you might say, all right, you kind of cross your fingers and hope that it's not Tampa Bay and that he goes out to the West Coast. And he does have a no trade clause, so you do have to factor that in. So we'll see how that ends up going, if it is the West Coast, if he does actually wield that no trade clause. But I think if you're going to get a starting pitcher, I think that's where you go all in for Max Scherzer, from a standpoint of you go to what you're comfortable with. You don't surpass what. When I say go all in, I mean you give them pretty much carte blanche of your minor league system, other than your top three prospects, and then you say, yeah, all right, you can take these. And if they want Jeter Downs, because I'm not totally sold that Jeter Downs is going to be your second baseman of the future. Some of those pieces you got from the Dodgers, and maybe even some of the guys that you drafted here, except for Marcelo Mayer, you want to keep him. So maybe those four would be the untouchables, but everybody else you give carte blanche to in that system. And then you end up getting Max Scherzer. But like I said, I think it's going to be too rich for their blood. And I think just other teams in the NL West, where he wants to go out on the West Coast, is what it seems like. So I think if that's the best offer, then I think that's where the Nationals will end up trading him, just because, one, it works for them, and then it works for Max Scherzer. So that'll be where it goes. Now, some other quick names to look at here are Kyle Gibson, John Gray, and Marquez from the Colorado Rockies. In my opinion, I would love to have Kyle Gibson. Now, the only problem with Kyle Gibson for me is that the price on him might be a little too high as well, because you'd imagine whoever misses out on Max Scherzer is probably going to end up calling Texas, and then they're going to want him. They're going to want Kyle Gibson. Now, obviously, Kyle Gibson is a step down from Max Scherzer. Max Scherzer is a Hall of Famer. He started the All-Star game. He's one of the best of all time. But when it comes to Kyle Gibson, you're still going to get a solid, and in my opinion, a solid number two, at worst a number three. He's put together a career year. He is 33. He does have one more year of control. So that's a good thing if you're looking into that sweepstakes when it comes to between Max Scherzer and Kyle Gibson. So it just, like I said, for me, I just think the price might get a little too high, because that's going to be the next step down for those contenders that didn't get Max Scherzer. But if it's not too much, if it's not as much as you would think, then that's where I think they should go after Kyle Gibson as well. But I just think between Scherzer and Gibson, those are going to be pieces that just in the end might not be able to get it done for the Red Sox, as far as other teams might come in with better packages. Just because at this point, the Red Sox farm system, I know we talked about they have some good young prospects, but for the most part, they don't have a whole farm system flush to good prospects like they did back in 2016 through 17 before Dombrowski went in and used everything for Sale and Kimbrel and the likes of that. So that's just where I think you're not going to have some of that ammunition. You're going to have the money, you're going to have the other cachet, but you're not going to have the prospects, I think, to back this up in those two cases. I could be wrong about Kyle Gibson, but I just think with Scherzer, that's going to be the one that's really hard to pry him away from those teams out in the West that have so much more prospect capital to give, and even some other younger major leaguers that they might be willing to part with. Now, Gray and Marquez, those are more doable. Marquez is going to be the one that's going to be harder to get just because he has more control. Gray is heading for free agency, or very close to it. So I think John Gray, John Gray's having a good year. He was a top prospect. He throws hard. He's having a good year there out in Colorado. So it's a hitter's park. If he's having a good year in a hitter's park, that's even more of a bonus to me. And just I think if you get John Gray, that links some things out. So John Gray, really, if you're looking for a pitcher, is probably going to be the more realistic as well. So if you're looking into reality here for what the Red Sox need and what they would end up getting, I say it's probably going to be Jonathan Scope and John Gray would be the two pieces that I think you end up getting that kind of help you lengthen the rotation out and lengthen out the starting lineup. And those would be good pieces. Don't poo-poo those. Now, of course, Scherzer, that puts you way over the top. And trust me, I would love to have Scherzer or Kyle Gibson. Though Kyle Gibson, I don't think he puts you well over the top, but I think that's a lot better piece than getting John Gray or Marquez. Now, obviously, if we come back on this show next week and it's Max Scherzer and Anthony Rizzo or Max Scherzer and Carlos Santana, or even if it's Scherzer plus one of those other first basemen, Jonathan Scope, then I'll be jumping up for joy because, man, that rotation when Chris Sale comes back, if you got Scherzer and Sale, oh boy, that's a hell of a 1-2 punch. Then you're looking at like what the Dodgers have had over the last couple of years with Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler, Hyunjin Ryu, and things like that. And then obviously what you have going on out there in San Diego with Yu Darvish and Blake Snell. So that would be one hell of a rotation if you're able to pull that off. Now, like I said, I think if you're going to look kind of a little bit deeper into this, and if you wanted to go to the bullpen, then you're looking at bringing back a guy like Craig Kimbrel or Rodriguez from the Pirates, those two closers. I don't see any middle relief arms that are going to be better than what you already have, because you already have, like I said, you already have good guys in Sal Almora, Ottavino, and Josh Taylor. And I'm sorry if you don't believe in those guys at this point, then you've had your head under a rock or you're just refusing to believe it. Yeah, everybody's going to have a few rocky outings. It's the major leagues. It's going to happen. So we'll see. But I think if you do go for somebody, you end up getting that closer. You go for the gusto there, because Matt Barnes already came out today and already basically said if they go get somebody that's better than me, or they go get somebody that is an elite reliever like a Craig Kimbrel, he actually mentioned Kimbrel by name, then I think Matt Barnes is okay with that. And if you get Craig Kimbrel and put him into that bullpen, then man, that's a hell of a bullpen. So I wouldn't mind that. And of course that lengthens out your bullpen as well. So instead of having 6 arms, you have 7 arms. And if you don't end up getting a starter and it's just Chris Sale, then obviously Chris Sale would lengthen things out, but if you still have to go with a Pivetta, Garrett Richards, or Martin Perez, whichever combination of those back end guys that go with Sale, Evaldi, and Erod, then if those back end guys don't end up pitching deep into games, then, or even if Chris Sale, when he comes back, doesn't pitch deep into games, then if you get a guy like Kimbrel or Rodriguez to pair along with that bullpen, then that also helps as well. I just think I'd rather see them go get that starter to pair along with Sale in the rotation to kind of give them more length to that. Now, with Craig Kimbrel, he's also going to be a hot name that's going to be sought after on the market, just because everybody's always looking for closers and bullpen arms. So the price is going to be high on Craig. So I I don't know. I don't know if you're going to be willing to pay that price that it's going to cost you to get Kimbrel back in a Red Sox uniform. Just already when you already have a good bullpen. That's where I'm saying that's more of a luxury than it is anything else. So that's the last thing on my book that I would have them go get. Now, obviously, if you can maybe get a Rizzo and Kimbrel package, and you're not giving up a ton for that, or you're maybe just giving up one good prospect, not an all top 5 prospect in your system, then I would obviously I would do that, because you get your first baseman and you get a bona fide stud Hall of Fame closer to throw in there with Matt Barnes. But like I said, that's the last thing on my rung of wants. If I was going to prioritize this, I would go first base, starting pitching, and then way down deep is the relief. So for me, it's really first base. If you're gonna spend big, go to first base. Get yourself a Rizzo, get yourself a Santana. That, or even if you're going to get something at all, if you're going to be active, get the first base, get that production there. Obviously, if you could double dip, that would be great. Not that they haven't in the past, but if you held a gun to my head and said you can only take the one, I'm going to take first base. That's where it's going to be, is first base. And if for my pipe dream, if you ask me, pipe dream is Anthony Rizzo. And realistically, I think it's going to be Scope if you're going to get anybody at all. So, and I think this team is going to push their chips all into the middle of the table as we get here to Friday, because I think Chaim Bloom in this front office, and then even the ownership, they realize with a chance that they're way ahead of schedule, that they're not just like, oh, we're wild card contender, or we're okay contender. We might win the division, but we don't think we have it. No, you're the best team in the American League. You've played well against everybody except for Houston. So if you can get those pieces that pushes you over the hump against Houston, why not? Go for it. Do it. So that's what I think that's what's going to end up happening here. Is I think by the time we get back next week, if I was going to say anything, I think Rizzo will be just cheap enough. Not where you're gonna, give me your 50th best prospect. No, that's not how it's gonna work. But I think you get somebody that's within that top 15 of prospects. You don't have to give up your number 1 overall, your number 3 prospect. You can end up getting somebody halfway decent, and then I think you end up, maybe you get a John Gray. I think they end up getting a starter, maybe a low end starter to pair along. Maybe you get that swing guy. If I was going to say, I think you get Rizzo. If I'm making a prediction, you get Rizzo, and then you get a swing starter. I don't think they get Scherzer. I think Scherzer ends up going to out on the West Coast. Now, I hope I'm wrong by that. I hope by the time we get back next week that Max Scherzer is in a Red Sox uniform and he's ready to go, but I don't see that happening. I see him going out to one of those 3 teams, the Giants, Dodgers, or the Padres out west. So that's what I see happening here. And of course, we'll keep you up to date if anything happens in between now and next show on the Twitter account. Just keep following there, or follow my personal account, as you can see, at Sean_Met28. And then we will let you know what happens with the Red Sox and the rest of Major League Baseball. Now, we did mention the Bruins brought back Taylor Hall for a 4-year deal, and they did deal Dan Vladar. So we'll keep an eye out as well on the NHL free agency as we keep going here through the off season. And we'll touch more on that next week, probably a little bit in some of the notes, but we just wanted to let you guys know between the out of the box and here that those guys are back. So it was a full action-packed show today. Hope that you enjoyed everything, and hope that you're excited for the MLB trade deadline. You know I am. This is the first time in a long time, since 2018 or even before that I'm really jacked up for the trade deadline. Feels like when I was a kid again, where you're looking forward to like getting that big piece, and it feels like the Red Sox are in on a lot. So as I mentioned, just keep an eye out on our social media feed. We'll keep you up to date with any big trades that go down here. But that will do it for us here on New England Sports Weekly. We'll see you next week with any updates on the MLB trade deadline, who the Red Sox do or don't get. And we will preview NFL training camp and all those battles in camp, as well as an NFL preview. We'll go up and down from the Patriots all the way through all the divisions. We'll give you predictions, and maybe we'll even have a few special guests or two. Until then, I've been Sean Metcalf, and everybody have a good rest of your day.